Many of you here have badges on that look like this. Yeah. And that means that you are amongst members of the Historical Society as well. And we really take seriously the work that we do, which is to preserve and protect the many historic sites that are on the ranch, and to communicate to the residents about those sites. And so what we're doing today, as you know, is to dedicate this bench, which is in honor of the Bradford and Perley families. And those families, as you probably all know, are associated with the Bradford Perley house and the Bradford Perley property. At one point, until we heard yesterday, there was the great-granddaughter of James Adams and Charlotte Perley, who was going to be here, but something came up, Linda Shea, in her family, and she was not able to come today. So we don't have any direct Perley descendants here today, but we've got some, nevertheless, some honored guests who are here with us. We have Jerry Jones here, who was the former chair of the Historical Society and was chair at the time when efforts were taken to sort of preserve the stock of the apple orchard. And after he gave up the chair position to Jeff, you followed Jerry directly, did you, Jeff? Mm-hmm. Jeff Allison, who's been chair of the committee for several years. After that happened, that transition happened, Jerry continued to be the steward, the good steward of the apple orchard. And so we're really grateful that he did that and that he's here today. And then taking over Jerry's job after he no longer was the steward of the orchard, Mark Rieger, who lives nearby, who's walking distance from here, took over as steward of the apple orchard. So what we're going to do today, and I'll really talk fast if it starts to rain, bartender, is to, I'll just say a little bit. Everybody here knows probably the history of the house and so on. So I'll just say a little bit about that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jerry, who will say some things about the apple orchard, and then Mark will follow up with a few things. Was that you?
Very nice.
And then we'll have a little ceremony here with the bench, and then too bad the Bradford Perley house doesn't have a roof, but we'll have an open house there, and we have some refreshments there. Okay. So really quickly, just the context for this property here, it's 6-some acres, is associated with the Bradford Perley house. We think the house was built about 1860. We don't know that for sure. And we know that Bradford came to the Denver area in 1859. And he came because the gold rush was underway, and he wanted to, as a partner of some people from Missouri, he wanted to sell supplies to miners. And so he did that, and he opened a road into the mountains, and the road, as you probably all know, went by the Bradford Perley house, and then up, we think it went up on what is now the Manor House Trail up into the mountains. And Bradford moved here in 1861. He applied for a homestead in 1865. Not too long after the Homestead Act passed. And in 1870, we have the documents where you need to prove up on your improvements. And in that statement, he mentions the orchard. He mentioned that a part of the improvement was apple and peach orchard. We don't see any peaches now, but these larger trees are remnants of that orchard that is now, of course, over 150 years old. So Bradford died in 1876, and then the Perley family bought this property in 1895. James Adams Perley was born in Vermont. As a youth, he made his way in the gold rush, made his way to Black Hawk. He met his eventual wife there in Black Hawk, raised a family in Black Hawk, and they had 6 children. They moved here when he bought the property in 1895, and the older children were out of the nest by then. He came here with the younger children, and they lived here, the family lived here until 1926, although James Adams and his wife moved to Golden in 1920. But James Adams died in 1926, and at that time was when John Schaefer bought this property, and this became part of the King Carroll Ranch then. So because of the heritage of the Bradfords and the Perleys, then this is the Bradford Perley property. In 1997, the property was deteriorating, and thanks to members of the Historical Society at the time.
Excuse me. Oh, thank you.
Including and led by Marty Burdick, who lived near here, but he died recently. He was chair of the committee, and his wife Dottie and others on the committee then worked to sort of save this, to preserve this property. And in 1997, this became a state on the state register of historic properties. And in 2015, this became on the National Register of Historic Properties. So we're really proud of this, and we're proud of this whole site. There are lots of aspects of this historic site, of course the building, and of course the importance of the apple orchard. So are you ready, Jerry, to say something about the apples?
Sure.
Okay. And if you want to sit, you're welcome to do that.
No, I can get up.
Watch your coat there.
Bob Herring was an engineer and lived near here and was a member of our Historical Society. And Bob had a pretty good idea on how we could water these trees. And we're going to put a little water tower back here and run pipes under the ground in varying diameters to these little cuttings. And that's why they're situated between the trees. My wife Jerry was listening to a radio show that had been talking about apple trees, so Jerry telephoned the radio show, and they knew about an arborist named Scott Scorby. And Scott had saved the last Johnny Appleseed tree in Ohio, so he was an excellent candidate to talk to. So Jerry and I called Scott Scorby and his wife, who are both arborists, to come down from their nursery in Fort Collins, and they suggested we take cuttings from the adult trees, and they would take them up to their nursery, and they would meld them to Russian apple tree root balls. It's Russian apple balls happen to be used in nurseries throughout the United States. It's not a rarity. We spliced them and then let them grow them for 2 years, and then we got them here. And we put in 3 in 2010, and 3 in 2012, and 3 in 2014. And those were the key ones. They came in about 5/8 to 3/4 inch caliper and ranged from 4 to 7 feet tall. And they thrived. We even got some people interested in the community, and they would let us grow a few more trees and sell them to them. And that helped us with some of the finances for affording all the work here. the big trees are remarkable. The earth is right, the sun is right. It just works out that Bradford was one heck of a arborist. These trees, the ones that came out were about 24 trees. They were some peach and some of the, what was the name of the tree?
Yeah, it was
Ben Davis.
Heirloom Series Ben Davis variety.
Ben Davis, yeah, trying to remember that. We marveled at how successful they were and how many trees succeeded and kept growing, and it's just a wonderful orchard, and we can't believe how fortunate we were that they were so well planted and in the right direction and grew like they grew. Mm-hmm. That's about all I have.
We really want to thank Jerry and the committee. At the time, it was about 10 years ago that the effort was made to start sort of generating these smaller trees from the big ones. And the stimulus for that, I should mention, or one of the stimuli for that effort was by Julie Kierful. Many of you know Julie, who was the Community Standards Administrator for years, and then she retired recently. And she sent a letter to the History Society saying, can we do something about the apple orchard? And yes, and the committee undertook that, and it's been a great effort. And now Mark, maybe you want to say something about recent things with this.
Yeah, I just want to thank Jerry for his leadership in the Historical Society and his stewardship of the apple. We have our 2012 trees and our 2010 trees that are still alive. And we're carrying on. We clipped, Vinny and I clipped 15 branches with buds on them and sent them up to the Stats for propagation. He's got a special technique for grafting them into Russian root balls. So also I'm going to give credit to the bench people. Stone is the bench folks, and also to the open space committee that installed it, Peter and Mike, who also do a nice job of cutting our grass.
Okay, so let's again thank Jerry and Mark for their work with the apple orchard.
Well done.
And so I'm going to ask for us to do a ribbon cutting. I don't know if that's ever been done for a bench before. So I'm going to ask Mark and Jeff, would you do the honors of holding the ribbon? And I'm going to ask Jerry if you'd cut the ribbon. Okay. Would you be willing to do that?
Sure.
Jerry, I remember another place you cut a ribbon.
They're not going to come to you. Why don't you stand on the other side of let Jerry, so we can face the group, cut the ribbon.
Never a challenge for Jerry.
Here's a good show.
Shazam!
Yes, that's real good.
Ta-da!
Yay!
Thank you, Jerry. And let's have a first sitting. Let Jerry be the first one.
All right.
Newly dedicated. Test drive. And then
Would
Mark
you
and
believe
Jeff,
in
you ought to
college
be
I
the
was a
second,
quarter
so I
miler?
was sitting
Yeah. Cool. All
Yay! Very good.
What a great photo. Good lighting.
All right, wonderful.
Now you guys can all take your turn.
Yes, if you want to, come and...
How about the Historical
It's warmed up.
Society?
Come on,
yeah, why
sit
don't
on
you
it.
guys get behind?
And you'll take our picture.
Yes, yeah, and I'll take your picture. You guys do such hard, good work.
Oh,
Yeah. I'll take your picture.
thank you.
If that airplane would fly through here,
Who's going to take my picture?
storm would come.
Yeah, that's at the
Top
top.
of the heap,
Okay,
yeah, top of
yes.
the heap.
Oh, that is so very nice. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, no, I'm just gonna take one more so I can send it right to Victoria, and she can put it up. And it's really the clouds. I know they gave us a hard time, but they look really pretty now. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, we have
The
refreshments.
rain did spare us.
Yes,
I
we
was
have
gonna
refreshments
send
in
it
the house.
Yes, to Jim and Stephanie is like our publicity.
So then she'll send some to us.
Well, then why don't I just send it to you, and then you can.
This is really cool.
I won't do that.
Yeah.
No, you guys have to send it.
You'll do the little, you're not even seeing hikers.